All right, let's talk about money, but we're going to go way beyond the usual stereotypes of the rich and the poor. Today, we're diving into the actual science of how our financial situation, whether we have a lot or a little, literally changes the way our brains work.
You've probably heard this one before, right? For centuries, ideas like this have completely shaped how we think about wealth. It paints this picture that wanting money is somehow a moral failing. And that belief, it runs deep in our culture, affecting how we see everyone, from the super rich to those just trying to get by. But hang on, what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if the real story isn't about the moral price of having money, but about the very real cognitive price of not having it? That's the big question we're digging into today, how our financial reality actually rewires our minds. So here's the game plan. We'll kick things off by busting some common myths. Then we'll explore the psychology of both scarcity and wealth. We'll look at debt and whether it's a tool or a trap. We'll even put a number on the cost of financial stress. And finally, we'll rethink what's really going on with our financial behaviors. Okay, let's jump right in. Before we can get to the truth, we've got to clear away some of the fog. All those stereotypes that really cloud our thinking when it comes to money. We all know the labels, right? You hear them all the time. But here's what's really fascinating. Research actually shows that holding these negative beliefs about money is linked to having a lower income and net worth yourself. But honestly, these labels are just way too simple. They hide the real story, which is much more about our environment than it is about our character. So, let's look at what happens to the brain when you're living with scarcity. And this isn't about willpower or personality. This is about pure cognition. When things are tight, your brain's entire operating system shifts gears to focus on one thing: survival. And at the core of all this is something called executive functioning. The best way to think about it is like the CEO of your brain. It's the part that manages your focus, helps you say no to impulses, and crucially, plans for the future. And what the science tells us, loud and clear, is that the constant stress of poverty actually weakens this function, which makes every single long-term decision that much harder to make. And this slide breaks it down perfectly. See, scarcity traps your brain in what's called a proximal focus. It's all about the here and now. You're constantly just trying to put out fires. How do I pay this bill today? Where is dinner coming from tonight? And when you're doing that, there is literally no mental energy, no cognitive bandwidth left over for distal focus. And that's the stuff that matters for the future: saving, investing, planning ahead. So what does the other side of the coin look like? Let's flip the script and talk about the psychology of wealth. There was this incredible study that compared the mindsets of the truly wealthy with the mass affluent. And, well, the differences they found were huge. Okay, so check out this table. It breaks down the data beautifully. Just so we're clear, mass affluent is like, comfortably well off, but not super rich, and the wealthy are, well, wealthy. Now, look at the numbers. The wealthy score lower on money avoidance, which means they're way less likely to think money is bad or corrupting. They have a much stronger internal locus of control, which is just a fancy way of saying they believe they're in the driver's seat of their own life. And no surprise here, they report way less financial stress. So the big takeaway here isn't that one group is better than the other. It's about a mindset that is just less anxious and a lot more proactive. It's a psychological profile that's really geared towards seeing opportunities and taking smart risks, partly because their minds aren't constantly bogged down by the mental tax of scarcity. Now, you can really see this difference in mindset play out when we talk about debt, because for one person, debt is a strategic tool to get ahead. For another, it's a desperate trap that keeps them stuck. It all comes down to context. Good debt is basically leverage. It's when you borrow money to buy an asset you hope will grow in value. Think a mortgage for a house, a loan for a business, or an education. It's an investment. Bad debt, though, is usually that high-interest debt you take on just to cover the bills. It drains your money and doesn't build anything for the future. One mindset uses debt to build, the other uses it just to tread water. And let's talk about stress, because it's one of the biggest, most damaging side effects of financial scarcity. And this isn't just a feeling of being overwhelmed. No, as we're about to see, it has a real measurable cost that you can count in hours and dollars. This data is, wow, it's pretty staggering. Look at this chart. Employees with zero emergency savings lost over 6 hours of work time every single week because they were stressed about money. Compare that to just an hour and a half for people who had a cushion. That is a massive, massive productivity tax, paid for by the people who can least afford it.
So you might be wondering, what's the magic number to fix this? How big of a safety net do you need? You might think it's winning the lottery, but it's not. The research found a tipping point, and it's this number right here. $2,000. Having just 2 grams saved up was enough to dramatically slash all that worry and free up that precious mental bandwidth we keep talking about.
So, as we start to put all these pieces together, this whole new picture starts to form. It's a picture that's way less about judging people's character and much more about understanding the circumstances that are shaping their choices.
So, what have we really learned here? Well, a few big things. First, scarcity is like a tax on your brain that forces you to think short term. Second, having wealth is linked to a mindset of control and low anxiety. Third, a lot of what looks like bad financial behavior is actually a pretty rational strategy for surviving a tough environment. And finally, you don't need to be rich to feel better. Even a small safety net acts like a huge psychological shield.
Ultimately, all of this research really pushes us to stop looking at financial decisions as just a matter of good or bad character. Instead, it asks us to look at the context. So I'll leave you with this to chew on. When you look through this new lens, how has your own environment, whether it's been one of scarcity or abundance, shaped your own relationship with money?